So yeah, in this session we are going to cover about translators and what is a translator interface. The scope of this session will include how GlusterFS modules are organized, why they are organized that way. We will also learn a new concept called wall file, which is a configuration file for GlusterFS process. Based on the wall file, the same GlusterFS binary will lead to creation of a brick process or a GlusterD process or fuse mount NFS server. All of them are same binary but a different configuration. So we will see what the similarities are and how they are different in this session. Most of this session is going to have a lot of demos and code reading, not as many pictures as we had in the last few sessions. So how are GlusterFS module organized? Most of the modules in Gluster are organized as a set of translators. So all these translators are arranged in a graph which is represented in the wall file, and this graph actually is going to tell you whether that process is a GlusterD or a GlusterFSD or a GlusterFS process. For folks with OOP background, you can think of translator as an interface. And different features in GlusterFS will try to modify some of the file operation, the FOBs, a bit differently to provide that module's functionality. So because C is not necessarily an object-oriented programming language, some parts are a little bit different, but you can think of Xlator as an interface. So let's look at one such Xlator. Which one? We already looked at POSIX, so let's look at maybe AFR, which is the replication module. So you will see structure like this in most of the Xlator files, the modules. So we are seeing one such thing for AFR, right? We can see something similar in, let's say, EC. Okay, so you will see that, EC also has something similar here. So these are like the data that will be present in each Xlator, okay? And each Xlator will have to implement the file operations or callbacks. These are like, specific to the Xlator, the options and identifiers. So here it is saying it is like a disperse module, and here it is saying it is like a replicate module. Then there is initialization and reconfiguration of the translators that are present. Similarly, for looking at the state of the translators, we have something called as dump operations. Okay, this init, fini, notify are used for graph construction and graph bring up and communication between Xlators. So these things that we will only notify actually is used for communication between Xlators. Most of the other ones will happen through the file operations. Okay, so we can actually look at one such thing. Okay, so everyone who wants to write a new module, right, they'll have to implement the module, and they have to override whatever FOBs the module has to handle a bit differently than the default default way. So we can look at one such thing. Let's say the default one just gives the file operation to the next translator, the child translator in the graph. So that is like the default implementation. But most of the accelerators that have some features, they will implement that file operation. Okay. Similarly, let me look at EC. So this is how EC actually implements this. Okay. Each file operation that it wants to implement, it will add the implementation, and then it will add it to this accelerator interface. So that is how we have to implement the file operations. Similarly, the callbacks are related to resource management. In GlusterFS, we have inodes and file descriptors, for which when the last reference on the inode or the file descriptor is released, it will call these callbacks. And in these dump ops, different accelerators will implement different dumping operations. So we can actually look at how the dump ops are actually used. I can probably show you. So if we create a normal distribute volume, so there is this hidden directory called meta. Okay. It won't appear if you don't do cd.meta, but you can go into this. So this graph is nothing but the graph that is loaded in the process. Okay. So active is the active graph that is present now. Now you can see all the translators that are loaded here. Okay. So you can probably look at, let's say, D1 DHT. So when we do this cat private, so this will lead to an operation like this. So in dump ops, there is a .priv, and you can write code to dump whatever information that you want to be present here. So this is a way of looking at the contents of each translator that you want to expose to the mount. It is easier to debug with this information. So these are some of the things that are present in a typical translator. So the other thing that you would see is the options array. So you can configure something like, it depends on what the options are, but you can say like, there is this option called either lock in erasure coded volumes. So you can set some values for them, what is the default option, from which version of GlusterFS it is supported, etc. Those kinds of things you can specify here. So if you look at something like volume get V1. Okay, this is a little bit. Okay, so yeah, so you can see this information actually gets fetched from here. So, but this is a distribute volume, so it won't really have any effect. But I'm just trying to give you guys some example. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's look at the other things. So now that we know what these FOBs and CBKs, etc. are, you kind of get a sense of the structure of any accelerator and what to expect when you try to browse any translator that is present. You can start with these FOBs and try to see what each module is trying to do for that file operation. Like, for example, replication may do the operation on multiple children of that translator. If it is replica 3, there will be 3 children. If it is replica 2, it will be 2 children, something like that. So erasure coded volumes, if it is like 4 plus 2, it will have 6 children in the graph. So like that, it gets organized. Okay, So we will take a look at a typical stack. So if you look, all the client translators are here, all the server translators are here. There are too many server translators, so for now, I'm like, you'll get a picture of how these things are. But so at the top, you will have a FuseBridge translator, which actually translates between Fuse protocol to the ClusterFS protocol. And the IOStats is for collecting statistics. This is for doing the IO threads based on the amount of IO. It will either increase the number of threads or decrease the number of threads based on some limits. So like that, this is like it is a graph with only one child per the node. So this is how once you have a graph, you will have some nodes like this, and each node will represent one translator team. Okay, so let's look at some parts of the translator structure. All right. So we have seen these FOPs and CBKs, right, and also dump ops and options. So this private is something that is specific to the Xlator, and this DL handle is the way the Xlators get DL open. So in Linux, if you want to open a shared library, you will do something like a DL open and DL sim, and then you can get the symbols, and then you can make calls on it. So I think you guys can probably Google about how this DL open etc. work to get more information about that. But yeah, so we'll take a look at what a private is in some Xlators now. So let's look at maybe UFR private T. So you can treat any private data for an Xlator to be that Xlator, the translator specific information. All the configuration of the translator, the whatever we set through the options array, they generally get translated to the values in this private data structure. So I'll just show some example here. So if we look at afr.c, maybe there is this option called use compound pops. Okay, but this is deprecated. Let me, yeah, let's look at this granular entry here. So it says that if this option is enabled, Selffill will resort to granular way of recording change logs and doing entry Selffill. So if we try to look at this granular entry heal, it is getting stored in this entry Selffill granular variable, which is like the private, which is in the private structure of AFR. So we can, yeah, so we can see that, this is how AFR is storing the options. So based on the kind of values that we are, the options represent, it could be integers. Like for example, this Halo max replicas, min replicas, those options will be integers. Okay. So from the options framework, whatever is the option, whatever are the options that are specified in the translator, the WAL file, they'll get stored as your private data, which actually modify the translator behavior based on the options that you have set. Okay, so there are two things in options setting. One is the option initialization, which gets called when the process is coming up. The same thing also happens at the time of reconfiguration, which is like when you execute some volume set command, etc. Then also it has to check whether any configuration has changed, etc. for that option. So that is how this, that is generally what the private data of an Xlator represents. Apart from that, if the translator wants to store any state of the operations that it is doing, etc. also, some data can be stored in stored for that. For example, in AFR, we have something called as the child up. Okay, so this represents whether brick that whether a child, which is like a client translator, is connected to the brick or not. So it can maintain such internal data also. So this is what the private data of each accelerator generally represents. So I'm mostly going to give the examples from replication or EC because that is what I mostly worked on. But if you guys can look at any other translator also, it will be something similar. Okay, then now we can look at, like, why are these GlusterFS modules organized this way. So the accelerator interface has proven to be like really valuable in Gluster because you can treat the accelerators like Lego bricks, and the way you modify the structure of these Lego bricks, it will represent something new entirely. So we can actually look at this based on the volume files, but one easy thing that we almost a lot of people who use Gluster run into is something called as IO threads, which actually increases the number of threads that are present in the break or the client, but the code is same. So if you look at iothreads.c, this is the translator that represents the IO threads implementation. And in almost all of these accelerators generally don't assume where they are, maybe except things like, client translator or like, POSIX translator. POSIX translator has to be just above the disk file system. So that has to stay on server only. But we may come up with some innovative ideas there also if you want to store persistent cache on the client or some such thing. But most of these accelerators act in a position independent way. So if we look at the WAL files of these processes, okay, so let me check varlib. Okay, so the WAL files are generally in varlib gluster-d. Where is the WAL file? Okay, okay. Now, if you look at these WAL files, these are the configurations that represent the graph. So let's take a look at one such graph in bricks first. Okay. Oh, it is here. So we can see, okay, yeah. So this is one thing that I wanted to tell. So if the accelerator graph has to be from top to bottom this way, the WAL file generally will be bottom to top. That is because you need to keep on mentioning what is the parent. So we'll try to understand what these are, okay? But before that, let me just tell you about the IO threads. So you see that one node in this translator graph is IO threads. Okay, this is for brick. Okay, but the same thing may also be there in client graph also. You can see that it is there in client graph also. So to improve the performance of be it client or server, you don't have to implement two separate implementations. You can just implement the translator functionality once, which is position agnostic, and you can just place it in different processes to improve its performance. So that way the translator model and the architecture has been extremely helpful in reducing the amount of development we have to do. So that is one thing that I wanted to cover. We will see that, like, the how it's all of the binaries that are present in Gluster are, like, the same binary, but it will pose as something different. It will act different based on the volume files. So let's look at, so this is my laptop. So the installation is on user local because it's a source installation. So you will see that there is only one binary, GlusterFSD, and GlusterFS and GlusterD, they actually are pointing just to GlusterFSD. So all these three processes basically are from same binary. Okay, so we can actually look at one once. Okay, let me give you this cluster D. Okay, let me kill all these processes. Cluster D, cluster FS, cluster FSD. Okay. Now, if you look at, you can actually, because we know what these WAL files are, right? We can actually launch these processes without any cluster D actually. So if you look, if you go to root, etc cluster. There should be a WAL file somewhere here. Yeah, so there is this glusterd.wal, right? So even glusterd, the whole functionality of glusterd is also nothing but a translator. Even glusterd has to implement a WAL file, but it doesn't have any file operations, etc., because it's not a FS specific translator. It is more of a control plane translator. But you can see something neat here now. So if you do cluster volume info, it says that cluster daemon is not running because we killed it. But you can do something like -f and glusterd.wal. Okay, now if you do cluster volume info, it'll work. So you guys probably are now understanding what, when you run glusterd, what exactly happens in the background. So essentially what it is doing is to, specify some information about where to pick this WAL file from. So there is an installation directory, and to that it will add this path, and it will just read the configuration and load the graph. Okay, so if you look at /mntd, okay, I think I filled them right. So okay, so cluster fs -f where, yeah, so if you do something like this, the mount process will come, but I don't think the brick process is running. Or is it running? Oh, wait a second. Probably got killed. Okay, let me first start this one. So this is going to start the brick process. Oh, there was some problem, I think. Okay, I think, let me, I think I'm missing some detail here. Marley plus D. Oh, trusted. Okay. 1 second. Oh yeah, sorry, the mount is running. Mount process is running. Oh, the brick process probably I did not kill or what? I think I did not kill it. That's why it's not operational. But we can kill this also and just. I hope it will run properly now. Okay, I don't know whether I've done something wrong here. Okay, I'll probably have to debug why this is happening like this. But for now, so basically you can see that just by changing the wall files, generally you can bring up the same functionality. Let me just one course. Well, I probably will have to give some of these extra options, but I probably don't remember. No, maybe these ports, I think. Ports I probably will have to give. That's the reason why it is not working out. But yeah, but most of the things, the configuration generally gets picked up from this one only. And even if you look at, if you do touch AI, you will see that in the brick also. So whatever was there on the mount got created in the brick. Okay, so this is something that I wanted to show you guys, that same binary, different wall file actually leads to different functionality. So now let's look at the okay, yeah. So this is a so why are we using wall files? Why did we invent our own format for specifying the configuration instead of XML, JSON, YAML? Like they are generally the formats that you specify for any configuration. But you have to understand that ClusterFS was developed in like mid 2000s. So at that time, apparently these people felt XML was not hand editable that easily, and JSON and YAML haven't been they haven't become popular yet, not as much. And they also wanted to not have a lot of external dependencies, so they just went with their own format, and they implemented these lexers and parsers for this format. So you will see a compiler in ClusterFS also. So we have already seen this operating of the volumes without any cluster D in the picture. We will now probably move on to how the graph bring up actually happens. But let me take a pause here and ask if there are any doubts so far. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is text. Okay, I am guessing no. All right. Okay, so the graph construction is a little bit similar to what you might have coded in your engineering days. It will, like, the name is like the name of the translator. Type is whether it is is it a POSIX translator, replicated translator, those kinds of things are specified in the type. So this is not something that we will be using for now. So this next and prev are like the list of translators. So all the translators that are represented by a wall file will be in a list, and then you will link different translators as children's and parents, so that a graph gets built. So we will now see, like, from now on, it's all, code reading, and the whole thing is just like the bring up of the translator, the translator graph. Okay. So first, let's look at the parsing part of the wall file. Okay. Mm. Is the font size okay? Okay. Hope this is fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just show you the wall file on one. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Wall file on one end, and the parsing part on the other. We probably won't go into the lectures and compiler part that much, but just enough to understand the code. Okay, it's been written in like mid 2000s, but I don't think we ever had to change it because nothing new was added after that. So okay, let's look at choose one. Okay. So graph.c is it is like libclusterfs src. Graph.c is where most of the code related to this is present. So I think it is called process wall process. It is not that. Wall. I thought I will go for something, so I wrote down this one. Okay, this is the function. Okay, it is in cluster fsd dot. Sorry, but it will call functions that are related which are present in like graph.c and all that. Okay. So this fp is like if this is file pointer that is representing this one such wall file which has the content like this. Okay, something like this. Now in graph construct is when you will create the bare bone graph data structure. You will open the file, and then you will call something called as pre-process. Okay, so it will copy the configuration, etc. I think then it will start its parsing. Okay, so the way it works is not L, I think. So here, is it in graph? 1 second. So these are like YY parse and YY this one. I just want to show command dot y maybe. Oh yeah, so here they are. Like you specify what the tokens are. Okay. So this volume is like the one token, type is one token, option is another token. Then the sub volumes is one token, and end volume is another token. Okay. Anytime one such token related context is captured in the parsing, it will call some function. Okay. So this is like you have to specify how you can this is like the grammar of this volume file, how many volumes. I'm like I don't know whether we should discuss this or not, but at the high level you can specify what is the correct grammar for this file and what is not. So that is specified in this. After that, yeah, so these are the functions that get called every time there is a hit. Like if there is a new volume, okay, this new volume function gets called. Okay, as part of that new volume function, it will create one translator. So it is creating one translator here. Okay, and it will set up its name, like options, the bare bone accelerator structure it will create. Okay, then okay, so let's say type, volume type, I think. Yeah, so whenever this line gets parsed, then it will call this function, okay, which will set the type of the translator. Okay, all these accelerators, CBKs, etc. It will specify, and then it will do this dynamic loading. Okay, so if you want, so the type also acts as a path to the shade library that it needs to DL open. So that's why you are seeing that it is specifying a .so. So maybe we can just look at this one. So if you look at user local lib, yeah, so this 8.4, right? Accelerator. So all the accelerator related .sos will be here. So if it says protocol client, so we will have protocol client.so here. Okay. If you say cluster./distribute, you will have cluster.distribute.so here. So it will basically specify where to pick up the translator implementation from. Okay, so that is one thing. And after that, after the volume type, this is like volume option, which is like the simplest implementation. So it is just like key and value. So whenever an option line gets parsed, you have a key value which gets set into the translator dictionary. Where is the, yeah, so it just sets the option, key and value. You can think of dictionary like a Python dictionary. Okay, then let's look at the subvolumes thing. That is actually interesting. Volume sub. Okay, actually figures out who is the parent and who is the child. So in this case, DHT is the parent and the client is the child based on the names of these of the accelerator. So it traverses the list of translators already scanned and sees what subvolumes are already there, which can be marked as children. And for each such children, there will be a call to this clusterfs accelerator link, which will be called with the parent translator and the child translator. It creates these accelerator list structures, data structure, which can store the list of accelerators. So the parent accelerator, Excel parent accelerator will be set as a parent accelerator. Excel child accelerator will be set as a child accelerator. For child accelerator parents, this Excel parent gets added, and for parent accelerator children, the child accelerator gets added. So that's how the link gets established. Thing, and then like end means you are done with that particular translator. Okay, then there are some errors. If you specify something, some errors here, it will, like the parsing will fail. Okay, so this is how your translator graph gets constructed. Okay, all right, so once the construction happens, now there are some edge cases that you cannot specify fuse as a translator, and if it is a protocol server, there is some extra special handling that has to be done. And then these are like in memory translators that gets loaded specifically. So they are not generally present in the WAL file, but you sometimes load these things. Some of them are like the access control translator is something that we load by default. Worm is like write once and read many times. So this Mac compatibility, I think that is not in use now. I think GFID access and meta is the one that we have seen, like that dot meta, and we saw some configuration in private, right? So that is what meta is. Okay. All right. So it will add some more extra translators sometimes, and then it will call something called as an activate. So this is when your process is coming up. Okay. So there is some option validation that will happen, which like, each translator will be given these things, and it will do some checks, I guess. Then if everything is successful, then you can go ahead with the init. So this is the one where we have seen something called as init, right? Like each accelerator. Okay, I think, maybe I will show it here. So it is basically calling this init function. For each translator, will specify some init function where it will create the data structures that it wants, the private data structures or any other thing that it wants to create. This is like a constructor. You can think of init like a constructor call, and it will initialize all of the information that is needed for that translator to function. Okay, so that includes like option parsing or setting up any other structures that will be used at runtime. So for all the translators that we have loaded in the graph, it will do this construction. Okay, it will call init, which is like a constructor. Okay, once the init happens, this is some special handling, so which is fine. What it will do is it will create. Okay, so there are two things in GlusterFS process. One is a master translator, the other is a top translator. So master translator in a client is something like a something like Fuse. Fuse is a master translator. That translator will never change. But when you add like bricks or remove bricks, the underlying graph may change. Okay. So the master translator will never change, but the top translator may change based on the configuration changes. Okay. So it will specify that new graph has been instantiated to this master translator so that it can set some like internal data structures. After that, it will call parent up. So this is like the bring up. So on the topmost translator, the one that does not have any parent, it will notify an event called the parent is up now. Okay, so each translator in this graph. So at the moment, this graph, what's that? Parent up event is starting from here. Okay, so it will tell its children that it will do whatever it needs to do if there is something that it has to do at the on that event, and then it will tell its children that your parent is up. So that event will percolate down till client. Okay, so once the parent up event gets goes till the last translator in the graph, it will do some initialization on its own. For example, in client translator, it will have one dots here. Okay, so each accelerator has this thing called as notify. So that is how it will call its children's. It will call each accelerator will call its children's notify function with the event. So that is how the event will percolate down. On receiving this parent up event, the client translator will start a connection to the brick. Okay. So once the connection is established, then it will do something called as child up, which I think in the screen can dark is seen. Child up. Okay, yeah, it is here. So it will tell its parent that the child is up. Okay. So this one will percolate up, which is in the reverse direction of the parent up. So this translator will say it is up to the parent, and DST will do some extra handling of the child up, and it will tell its parent that your child is up. So if any accelerator has multiple children, this accelerator will wait until quorum number of translators are up, and then tell its parent that that child is up. Like that, it will go till fuse. Once fuse gets this child up, then your mount is ready for operations. It can now start accepting the FOPs. So in general, all the accelerator graphs that we have, this is the same bring up sequence. So once the master translator knows that all children are up, then it will start accepting operations. So that actually concludes whatever I wanted to cover in this session. Okay, yeah, so some things, okay, I think I can also add server accelerator. RPCs. Oh, so these are your typical master translators. Okay, the Fuse, NFS, GF API, and server. These are your master translators generally, and they actually are the ones that are exposed to the outside world. And they actually take care of the translation between the outside world and internal to the accelerator. Okay. With this knowledge, the only thing that we have to cover now is the programming model in GLUSTFS, which is how does a FOP percolate from the top translator to the brick and vice versa. I'm like, how will it respond from brick to the these protocol translators? So once we understand that process, now that will actually conclude the basic parts of Gluster that everybody needs to know to look at any translator and figure out what it is doing. So we are just like one more session away from understanding that part. Okay, any doubts?